To start, we're going to continue working on the balance sheet. Here's our program for total current asset calculation here. We did this last time. You notice here's a declaration of all the variables and putting values in them. And there's how we did it with cells and how we did it with range, and then just this shortcut reference. Here's adding everything up. There's the end of the line indicator there with a space and an underscore. And then we put the total current assets over here in D4, change the format. There's some alternative formats that we talked about. So what I'd like you to do now, just to kind of get warmed up, is go through and take all of our other values, our long-term investments, our property, plant, and equipment, including this office equipment less accumulated depreciation, which would go there, and write a program for each one of those, and we'll come to that point. So go ahead and get started on that. Pause the video and work on that, and then when you're done, come on back and we'll see where we are. Pretty warmed up. You can see here I've put calculate buttons next to all the values I'm going to calculate. So there's my total current assets. There's my long-term investments. Actually, it looks like I probably want to move this one up a little bit. Found the right spot. There we go. There is my property, plant, or excuse me, my office equipment less accumulated depreciation. There's my property, plant, and equipment. And there's my total assets. So here's my code here. Here's my long-term investments. And you can see that this is all following the same pattern that we've used before. There's my office equipment, property, plant, and equipment, and total assets, which I have variables for those. I went through and I just gathered all of those subtotals, added them together. Like that one off just a little bit. Bring that over. That whole thing there, and then adding that up to there. So if you don't have that done, go ahead and pause the video and put the buttons on and get everything fixed there. Okay, so now that you've got all of those 5 programs written, we're going to write one program that runs all 5 of those programs, so that when you press the one button, all it's going to do is call the 5 programs. So I'm going to go through here and I'm going to take off all my buttons. Get these clicked right. Go through and delete the values that I've calculated and placed there. That should be emptied out. Now go ahead and write a program that calls all 5 of those, so that when you press, we'll put a button up here by assets, and when you press that button, it should go ahead and call all 5 of those programs and fill that in. So here we are. I have included a calc assets button, or calculate assets button, and when I press it, you'll see that it goes through and it does all of the calculations and gets everything added up. Well, how did I do that? Well, if I were to go to assign macro here, I'd see that I have this calc assets macro that's assigned. And what does that look like? That's just right here. And I just, inside of that, it just calls the name of each one of those. So if I was to come over here and run this, I'm going to press F8 to step through this. Notice it's going to run total current assets first, and come up here and run through everything. You see the value placed there. And it's going to run calc long-term investments. go through, and the value is going to be placed there and formatted, and it's just going to go through each one of these. And we're done. So could we have done that all in one big long program? Probably, yeah, and we wouldn't have had any problems with it. But sometimes it's good to break a task up into several smaller programs, and that will be beneficial in that we have 5 small problems that we're trying to solve here instead of one bigger problem, and it's easier to keep track of variables and all of those sorts of things. So are you required to break everything up into a small little problem? No, but I would definitely recommend that that's something you consider doing. Okay, for our next step, you can see here that I have taken off my code because I want you to think about what you need to do here rather than just copy what I've done. You noticed I've put a new button on here for Calc long-term investments, and I've taken out the long-term investment here. So what I'd like you to do is create some code that not only calculates long-term investment, but when you run it, brings up a message box that tells you the total long-term investment amount in a message box, as well as places it right there. So just to show you again, let me click this button, puts the value there, and gives you a message box telling you what that value is. So go ahead and pause the video and work on that. So here's what my code looks like for this. I have just added this line here, message box. And as you've done your study, you know that message box gives us that box that pops up, and a space, and then the total long-term investment amount, colon, and with quotes. Now there's my ampersand, which is my concatenation operator, and space underscore. This would have been out there, but I wanted to get it all on the same line. And then format my total long-term investments and to give it the dollar sign and everything. So when I run it, that's where that format comes from and everything. And there we go. For this next section, you're going to need to take these values here in your current assets and just cut them and paste them here where they're in easy view. So we're just moving those numbers there. And the reason I'm having you put those numbers there is so you remember what the right numbers are. What we're going to do now is write a program using InputBox and using MsgBox that will go through and ask the user for each of these values. So the program should go through and say, what is cash? And it should take that value and put cash there where it goes, and say, what is short-term investments? And put the short-term investment value there, and so on. And then it should calculate your total current assets down here. So I'm going to take that off also. So I'll show you what this should run like. All right, so now you see that I have my get current assets here. Of course, I've taken off my code, and I'll walk you through how this ought to run. So when I press get current assets, what is the cash amount? And I enter the amount that I've put right here. What is the short-term investment? What is accounts receivable? Hope I get that right. Notes receivable. And you notice it puts them all there, puts my total current assets there, it gives me new total current assets amount. Notice I changed the format on that just a little bit. So go ahead and pause the video, and using InputBox to get all the values, and MsgBox to display the total and put all the values on here. So here's my code for get current assets. You notice this is all the same. You notice here, instead of doing what I did up above here and saying my cash is equal to the value in those cells, I'm now saying my cash is equal to whatever the input box gives me. Now notice on the input box, we use the parentheses, and what question we want to ask goes here in the quotes. And so that really is the only change at this point. Rather than pulling them from the cells, I'm going to ask the user to enter them. And then we go through and we put the values in the cells. And if you notice, this is just a flip of what we've done here. Of course, I just used all cells on that. Then we add everything up like we did before, put it on, and then we use the message box to give back the total amount. So far we've been working pretty much exclusively with the asset section. So for some practice, go through and do the same thing that I did to get current assets, to long-term investments, property, plant, and equipment, and to total assets. I'll add it for intangible assets also. And then come down here and add your liabilities and stockholders' equity section. So go through and do your current liabilities, long-term liabilities, stockholders' equity, and your total liabilities and stockholders' equity. Take some time and practice this so you understand how this works. Make sure that you're using input boxes and message boxes to do this. You need some practice with that. The quiz that we have coming up will cover everything that we've covered so far. So it will cover reading from specific cells and writing to specific cells on a worksheet like we've been doing here. It will include doing some calculations. It will include message boxes, and it will include input boxes. So make sure that you can do all of those things. This will be good practice for you. The quiz will be 15 minutes, and you'll have, if you understand what you're doing, there'll be plenty of time. If you haven't practiced this, there won't be very much time. So take the time, and I'm not going to show you my code because I want you to actually work through this, but take the time and go through and work it out for the rest of your assets, and then do it for your liabilities and your stockholders' equity section. And then go ahead, put a button on that runs the whole balance sheet there so that you can get all the values put in on the balance sheet and get everything working. That will be good practice and good preparation for the quiz.